You are working hard. You already know that. And still, something is not adding up. Money comes in, and somehow it does not stay. You earn more than you used to, and somehow you still feel behind. You check the balance, and something tightens in your chest before you even see the number. You save, you plan, you cut back, and the relief you expected never quite arrives. There is always one more thing, one more hit, one more month that does not close the way you needed it to. And the silence around all of this is its own kind of weight. Because you are not telling people how tired you are. You are not saying out loud how much energy it takes just to keep up the appearance that everything is fine. You smile, you handle it. But at night, or in the quiet moment after the bills are looked at, there is something underneath the numbers that feels heavier than the numbers themselves. I want to tell you something, and I want you to really hear it. The problem is not only that the world is unstable right now. It is not only the economy, or inflation, or interest rates, or whatever headline is being used to explain your discomfort this week. Those things are real. I am not dismissing them. But they are not the deepest explanation for what you are feeling. The deeper truth is this: you were taught to meet money in a way that quietly blocks it. Not because you are lazy, not because you are cursed, not because you are somehow less capable than people who seem to move through financial life with ease, but because the map you are given was incomplete. And an incomplete map does not just fail to get you where you want to go, it actively leads you somewhere you did not mean to end up. There is a hidden law. It is older than any financial advice you have ever read. It does not appear in investment podcasts or budgeting spreadsheets or motivational seminars. Most people go their entire lives without hearing it spoken plainly, and they feel that absence without being able to name it. They work harder, grip tighter, worry more, and wonder why the effort never translates into the peace they were promised. One shift in posture can begin to change how money stays, how it moves, and how it finds its way back to you. But here is the warning: if you keep doing what feels safe, if you keep tightening the way you have been trained to tighten, you may keep deepening the very cycle you are trying to escape. Stay with me. This matters more than the headline, because the headline is just the door. What is behind it is where your life actually lives. You have felt it, haven't you? That particular shame of working this hard and still feeling like you are treading water, watching someone else seem to glide forward and not understanding why your effort does not produce the same result, wondering if maybe you are just not built for abundance. If maybe the calm, steady financial life you imagine is for other people. Let me say it directly. You are not lazy. You are not cursed. You are not broken. You are laboring without alignment, and that is a completely different problem with a completely different solution. Exhaustion is not always proof of virtue. Gripping hard is not the same as being a faithful steward. Most people have been taught that the tighter they hold, the safer they will be. So they grip. They hoard mentally even when they cannot hoard materially. They scan the horizon for danger. They make decisions from a place of quiet panic. And they call all of this discipline. But the heart state beneath an action matters as much as the action itself. Fear wearing the costume of discipline is still fear, and fear at the level of money is not a neutral force. Here is the thing that will unsettle you, and it needs to unsettle you. What feels most like protection may actually be the trap. The world gets uncertain, so you contract. You hold tighter, you trust less, you stop moving as freely. You build walls around what little you have. It feels like survival. It feels responsible. It feels like the adult thing to do. But money is not only collected, it is circulated. It is directed. It is spiritually responded to in ways that the hoarding instinct was never designed to understand. Many people unknowingly close the very hand they want filled. They wait for the fear to go away before they give generously. They wait for the abundance before they practice abundance. They wait for safety before they act like someone who is safe. And so the pattern holds. the fear stays, the hand stays closed, and the circulation they were hoping for never begins, because circulation requires release, and release requires a kind of trust that fear will never be ready for. I am not asking you to give what you do not have or pretend that the pressure is not real. I am asking you to consider that the map you have been following may have a fundamental flaw at its center. And that flaw is not a budgeting error, it is a posture. Before I explain the method, though, you need to understand where I learned this and why I trust it. Because I did not arrive at this through a book. I did not read it in a finance column or hear it at a conference. What I am about to share with you came through people who lived it. People who held it quietly and passed it down in the spaces between instruction and example. People whose relationship with provision was so different from what the culture teaches that watching them was almost like watching a different law at work. I received this through inheritance, not invention, and that is the only reason I trust it the way I do. There is a difference between information and transmission. Information can be found anywhere. Transmission comes through relationship, through time, through the kind of knowledge that is only given to those who are close enough and quiet enough to receive it. What I carry about money did not come from data. It came from decades of watching, from old conversations I only half understood at the time, from rituals practiced so consistently that they stopped looking like rituals and started looking like breathing. This is not a trick. It is not a hustle. It is not a motivational reframe designed to make you feel better for 48 hours. It is a guarded way of relating to provision that most people never encounter because it is not taught in the places most people look. Modern culture teaches money mechanics. Track it, optimize it, automate it, hustle for it, protect it. But it ignores money posture. It ignores the invisible dimension of how you stand in relation to what you receive, what you hold, and what you release. And without that dimension, all the mechanics in the world will only take you so far. I understood the words later. First, I saw the pattern. I was young. The kitchen was quiet in the way kitchens are quiet when the day is winding down and the serious things are being handled. My grandfather was at the table. The light was low. There was an envelope in front of him, and his hands were still in a way that felt deliberate, not distracted. He was not counting frantically. He was not sighing over the numbers. He was doing something I could not name at the time. He was pausing, consciously, visibly pausing before he did anything with what was in front of him. He set a portion aside first, not last, not when there was something left over, but first, quietly, with a kind of intention that had no performance in it. His lips moved just slightly, not for show, just something private between him and whatever he understood provision to be connected to. Then he folded the rest with steady hands and began to direct it. Rent, food, the small savings, each one named. I asked him later what he was doing. He looked at me with the kind of patience that older people have when they are deciding how simply to explain something they have held for a long time. He said, "What leaves in the right spirit does not leave your life empty." I was too young to understand it fully, but I felt it. The calm around money in that room was not because there was plenty of it. There was not. It was calm because of how he met it, because of the posture he brought to the table before a single dollar was moved. I would spend years understanding what I saw in that moment, and I would eventually realize that what he showed me in that kitchen was an entire economic theology in miniature. Not a technique, a way of being. A relationship with provision that the world mostly does not teach, mostly does not model, and mostly does not believe is real. The memory only makes full sense once you understand the method. But the method only makes sense once you understand why everything else falls short. And that is where we have to go next. Because the advice you have been given is not wrong. It is just incomplete in a way that makes it brittle. Budget harder, Save more, hustle differently, think positive, optimize everything. And underneath all of it, stay privately panicked while pretending you are being disciplined. Discipline matters, planning matters, responsibility matters deeply. I am not dismantling those, but without alignment beneath them, they remain shallow. They address behavior while leaving the fear untouched. They change the action while leaving the spirit of the action unchanged. And it is the spirit of the action, not the action itself, that determines what the action produces. Most advice touches the surface. Before money can be stewarded well, it must first be met cleanly. And that is what almost no one is teaching. The law is simple. Living it is what exposes the condition of your heart. Money does not merely respond to labor. That is the first thing you have to understand, really understand, not as a concept, but as a lived reality. Money responds to the spirit in which it is received, held, directed, and released. Those four dimensions are invisible to most people, which is why most people keep trying to solve a spiritual problem with a mechanical answer. The intention you bring when money arrives, the timing of what you do with it before fear sets in, the posture of your hands, open or clenched, when you face what you have, and the quality of your release when you direct it outward. These are not poetic extras layered on top of the real work. These are the real work. Everything else is downstream from these four things. This is one of the most important corrections I can give you. Abundance is peace. It is continuity. It is the stability that does not collapse under one bad month. It is right movement, non-chaotic increase, the sense that provision is flowing through your life rather than constantly leaking out of it in ways you cannot explain. You may have been trying to change the amount without changing the relationship, and that is why the amount keeps disappointing you. Here is the sequence. Hold it seriously, because seriousness is part of how it works. When money enters your life, do not grab it emotionally. This sounds simple, and it is almost never practiced. There is a moment, right when income arrives, when most people lunge. They immediately attach it mentally to every fear that has been waiting. They assign it to the anxiety before they assign it to the purpose. The first step is to create a pause, a breath of stillness before the money is touched. Not long, not dramatic. From that stillness, acknowledge where it came from. Not vaguely, not as a motivational exercise, as a conscious recognition that provision is entrusted to you, not self-generated by you alone. Your effort is real, your skill is real, but there is something larger that opened the door your effort walked through, and ignoring that creates a pride in the hands that blocks the next delivery. Then, before anything else, set apart a first portion. This is the act my grandfather practiced at that kitchen table. Not what is left over, not the remainder after everything else is handled. The first portion, directed outward with intention, given quietly, given consistently, given without drama or announcement. This is not payment for a blessing. This is an alignment signal. It is the declaration that fear is not the lord of your household, that you are not managing from scarcity, even when the numbers feel scarce. Then name what the rest is for, clearly, without panic and without pretending. Peace for the home. Integrity in the basic obligations. Not desperation, not manipulation of an outcome, just honest and sober naming of what needs to be covered and built. Then direct it. Pay, save, prepare, build. But from steadiness, not from the frantic energy of someone who believes one wrong move ends everything. And then, release the mental grip. This is where most people quietly fail. They do all the right external steps, and then they spend the next 2 weeks mentally clutching every dollar as if the terror itself creates safety. It does not. Once you have directed it with intention and sobriety, you have done what is yours to do. The rest is not controlled by worry. It is held by alignment. Release is not irresponsibility. Release is the final act of trust that makes the whole sequence spiritually coherent. Then repeat it, every time, rhythmically, not because the repetition is magic, but because sacred repetition is how identity is formed. You are not just practicing a sequence, you are becoming someone. But here is what I have to warn you about, and this warning is more important than the sequence itself. You can perform every external step of this method with a completely contaminated spirit, and it will produce nothing except perhaps a deeper cynicism about whether any of this is real. Greed ruins it. The person who gives the first portion while internally calculating the return they expect is not practicing alignment. They are practicing a transaction. And provision does not respond to transactions. It responds to relationship. Ego ruins it. The person who gives generously in public, who needs the giving to be seen, who is feeding their identity as a generous person rather than genuinely releasing from an open hand, that person has already received their return. It came in the form of the impression they made. Nothing further is moving on their behalf. The person who is so frightened that they give the first portion like a superstitious offering, throwing it out, hoping something comes back fast, has not released from trust. They have released from panic. And panic, even when it mimics the right external behavior, is not aligned with the spirit of the sequence. Regret ruins it. The person who gives the portion and then spends 3 days quietly resenting it, recalculating whether they should have, wondering if they made a mistake, has taken back what they released. You cannot release and grip simultaneously. The hand cannot be open and closed at the same time. The act can be externally correct and internally contaminated. Motive is not a side detail in this system. Motive is part of the mechanism. This is not about paying for a blessing. It is about whether you are standing in front of provision as a steward or as a panicked negotiator trying to force a deal. If you understand why contamination matters, you are ready for the deeper law beneath the method. Because behind all of this is a current that is larger than technique. Think of blessing as movement. Think of provision not as a static thing you possess, but as something that flows. What enters cleanly, what is held cleanly, what is directed cleanly, what is released cleanly, these things move. They carry something with them, and what they carry is not always immediately visible in the way that a bank balance is visible. Fear hardens. This is the invisible economic truth that most people never diagnose. When fear becomes the dominant posture, the hands harden, and hardened hands narrow perception. You stop seeing the opportunity that is in front of you because your entire nervous system is scanning for the threat. And narrowed perception distorts decisions. And distorted decisions create repeated financial pain. And the pain confirms the fear. Generosity, practiced from alignment, is not a loss. It is an interruption of that cycle. It is the moment where you declare, through action rather than words, that fear is not running your household. And that declaration shifts something. Not magically, not instantly in every case, but actually. Provision often expands first through peace, then through clarity, then through better timing in decisions, then through the favor that comes when you are operating from steadiness rather than scrambling. The numerical expansion is often the last thing to arrive, not the first. And the people who abandon the practice before the peace even settles never stay long enough to find out what was already beginning to move. And that identity shift is where the real increase begins. Because what you are ultimately building through this practice is not a better budgeting system. You are building a different self. A self that does not relate to money like an orphan relates to food, grabbing fast before it disappears, hoarding against future deprivation, never quite believing there will be more. Old identity, gripping, scanning, ashamed, reactive, privately frantic, managing from fear while calling it discipline. New identity, steady, entrusted, aligned, open-handed without being foolish, disciplined without being panicked, knowing that you are a vessel for provision, not merely a collector of it, understanding that what flows through you can increase, and what you clutch from fear will eventually stagnate. The ritual is not magic, the sequence is not a charm. What they do, practiced faithfully and from clean intention, is form the self. They train you, repetition by repetition, into someone who can hold increase without immediately destroying it. Because one of the quiet tragedies of financial life is that people receive breakthroughs and then recreate the old chaos, because the breakthrough changed their situation without changing their identity. The inside was never rebuilt, and the old pattern simply reasserted itself through the new circumstances. This is why the method is not primarily about money. It is about who you become in your relationship to provision. I have watched this pattern unfold in more lives than I can count. People who began quietly, skeptically even, not fully convinced, but willing to try the sequence with some sincerity. And the first thing they reported was not financial, it was peace. A strange, disproportionate sense of calm around money that they had not felt before. A reduction in the chaotic, impulsive spending that had always puzzled them about themselves. Clearer thinking when decisions arrived. A feeling of dignity restored to the home. Opportunities appearing in moments of stillness that would have been missed in the old frantic state. Relationships repaired that had been quietly costing them financially and emotionally. Resources retained in ways that seemed small until they added up. And eventually, yes, increase. Not always dramatic, not always immediately legible, but real and more stable than what they had held before. The first sign is almost always order, then clarity, then capacity. This is the sequence of fruit, and impatient people abandon the practice before the first sign has even settled. What I have shared with you today is the opening. It is not the full treasury. There are deeper layers to this inheritance. Sacred timing, the spoken word over a household, and what it does to the atmosphere of provision, the patterns of generosity that span generations, and what gets transmitted to children, not through instruction, but through what they watch their parents embody, the specific way that peace in a marriage affects the financial life of a home in ways that no spreadsheet can capture. Those are deeper waters. What I have given you today is the door. Do not let it be merely interesting. Interesting does not change anything. What changes things is the moment you sit down, quietly, when the next provision arrives, and you pause before you grab. You acknowledge. You set apart the first portion without drama or bargaining. You name the intention cleanly. You direct the remainder from sobriety, and you release the grip, trusting that you have done what is yours to do. That is the beginning of a different life with money, not a perfect one, not one without challenge or uncertainty, but one where the foundation is aligned rather than fractured, where the posture is open rather than clenched, where the identity is steward rather than survivor. Not all increase begins in numbers. Some begins in the moment you stop gripping and choose, for the first time with full intention, to release. Your finances can carry blessing. Your household can carry peace. Your decisions can carry wisdom that compounds quietly across years. And your children, if you walk this out faithfully, do not have to inherit your panic. They can inherit your alignment instead. That is worth more than any specific dollar amount. That is generational. If this is landing in you today, if something in here is confirming what you always suspected was missing, drop the words below. I am becoming a faithful steward. Not because it is a transaction, because it is true. Because you are choosing it. Because identity is declared before it is fully lived, and you are allowed to name what you are becoming before you have arrived. And if you want to continue learning the old laws of provision, peace, and stewardship that most people never hear, stay close. What was passed to me was not meant to stop with me.